Hello and welcome to Ever Chosen Minis. Today I'm going to show you a unique way that you can paint your custodies and get them ready for the tabletop. You might notice that these minis look a little different. That's because they're slightly converted to be lore accurate. We've taken the original heads off and replaced them with heads from the Sisters of Battle line. You can use any female head that you'd like for this conversion or keep them helmeted. Either way works for what we're about to do. We're going to start off with a black primer. And I know what you're thinking. We're not going to reach for the Retributor Gold. Instead, we're going to dry brush a mid-tone silver or metallic paint of your choice.
Now you want to let that dry a bit before moving on to our next step. If you try to move too quickly through the process, you'll end up wiping off a lot of the metallic that you just put down, and you'll be left with some bald spots across the mini that aren't going to look too good. Now we're going to start wanting to add some richness and diversity to our metallic base coat here. So we're going to start by watering down some purple. This can be a wash or traditional purple paint. If you have some contrast medium, that'll work really well for thinning it. But we're just going to cover the bottom half of each armor panel and where we think the shadows are going to naturally be on this model. And add a little bit of verdigris and some aging here. We're going to follow this by hitting the top areas with a watered down green. Now I've watered down some contrast paint for mine. Same thing as before though, contrast medium with an opaque paint works just fine as long as it's really watered down. Now you don't have to be too careful with this step. The next thing we're going to do is brighten this right back up. We're going to dry brush a bright silver over the model. Now this is going to kind of uniform everything, hide a little bit of what we did, but we're still going to have those subtle undertones. They're going to make this next step really shine. Now this next step is going to have them starting to look like proper custodian guards, give them that iconic golden armor. We're going to be covering everything we just did in an orange ink, and we're going to have a really good tonal variation because of that purple and green that we added before. Now any orange ink will do at this stage, but you're going to want to make sure that you wick it out of your brush. If you just pop it out directly from the pot, it's going to pool up like a wash. It's just going to make the whole thing look really orange. So just make sure that you wick everything out on a paper towel. We want a really, really thin coat, not too much on the brush on here. And that's just going to slowly start tinting everything. You can go over it a few times in certain areas. If it still looks a little bit too silver, or if you just want a richer gold, and you can do this to your liking, kind of double down on some of the areas that would have some shadow. And that's just going to enhance this metallic that we've created thus far. Now that we've tinted everything to a nice gold color, this step can get pretty messy. Inks aren't always very precise, and we'll want to come back in and kind of pick out the silver detailing. There's a few things on the spear, like the gun barrel. I also defined a few of the shapes on there. You can also do the little pipes that are kind of on the bottom half of the chest on the center of the custodes. Anything else that you think would look a little bit better, you can pick out, but those are just a few details I recommend as we want a little bit of metallic contrast to make the model a bit more interesting. Now to finish out the armor, we're going to just be covering everything in Agrax Earthshade. This just gives us a little bit more contrast and definition on the really intricate armor that the Custodes tend to wear. You can do it how I did it, which is essentially take it from the pot, put it onto the model, and you want to load up a little bit more water in your brush and kind of move it around. This is going to water it down and get everything pretty even in the recesses, making sure that nothing gets too dark. Just watch out for pooling during this step, as it's really hard to come back and fix later on. Moving on to the next part of the model, we're going to focus on the cloth wraps around their waist. And we're going to do this by starting off with just a mid-tone red. Mine took two coats. Hopefully you have one that covers a little bit better. And that'll kind of be the basis of where we start to build off of for these next few steps. Now, I find that the best looking capes tend to have a lot of contrast, and red can be kind of hard to do that with. If you add just pure white to your existing red and you keep going up, you're just going to get pink, which can look good. It just doesn't really read as red depending on how bright you want to make it. So what we're going to do is use kind of an orange red to highlight up from here. Wild Rider red works really well for this step, and it's going to start introducing some orange. Now we're just going to put this on the brightest parts, uh, so you can just kind of run your brush along the ridges And some of the more open flat parts where light would catch, you're also just going to want to put a little bit of that red as well. Now, the next step is going to seem a little strange and it's going to look weird until we finish it, but you're going to want to highlight with just a normal orange. Now, this is just going to make a ton of contrast between the original red that should still be showing at this point, kind of toward the recesses and such. And then once we're done getting everything highlighted, we have it all the way up to a bright orange. We're going to come in with a red contrast paint. Now, what I've used here is essentially a mix between Ball Red from Games Workshop and Speed Paint Slaughter Red. Kind of mixed 50-50. I used a little contrast medium, and when we put this over the cloth, it's basically going to tint that orange back down to a vibrant red. Still going to read as red now that we've tinted it. And because it's a contrast paint, it'll also go into those recesses, darkening them more. And that's just going to give us a great contrast. It's going to look really striking on the tabletop when you're looking at these things about 6 feet away. And it's just a really nice way that I have found to do these types of caves. Now, moving on to some of the smaller details on the Custodes, we're basically going to want to coat everything else in brown. We're going to use a deep chocolate brown. You're going to do this on the head. Mine's ended up getting bright dry brush metallic, so this is going to fix that, give it a nice dark undertone. Same thing with the gloves, the straps on the boots, and for my particular base, I also just slathered this on there to get it prepped up. And if y'all want to see how I do these bases, we'll be making another video on how I've done all of my favorite bases so far. And I'll walk you step by step on how to do that later if you want. Get back to the gloves now just to kind of finish them out. We're really only going to do two more things. We're going to do a quick, easy highlight. You should still have some red on your palette from the cape. You're going to mix that with the brown and a little bit of white. The Custodes typically have a little bit of reddish, rich leather gloves, and incorporating that into that highlight mix is just going to introduce that. I've just hit the very basic tops of everything where the light's going to catch. Also, just picking out the corners of the leather straps. There's not too much leather going on here, so this step should just kind of fly by. If you want more contrast, you can kind of just keep adding white until you've reached your desired effect. And we're going to bring this all back down with Agrax Earthshade again. This is going to make it match the armor and just going to redefine those recesses that we may have painted over during our highlight steps. Now, if you've decided, like me, to do a head swap here, and you have some skin to paint instead of a nice Custode helmet, I'm not the best at heads and faces, but the basics are essentially getting a nice skin tone we're going to base over our brown, which is going to give us kind of our mid-tone. I've used a contrast paint here. They do make contrast paints specifically for flesh tones, so you can pick one that you like there. I just happen to have Skeletal Horde on hand, which is kind of like a muted dark brown. So it worked well for me. You can water it down a little bit, just kind of slather that out there, get the details of the face defined, and then you're going to want to go in with a highlight color. I mixed my original skin tone with a little bit of ivory. You're just going to hit the tops of the facial features, just making sure that the recesses have some stuff in there, just so that we have a shape kind of going on for the facial features. Now you can do it one more, two more highlights, where you kind of just keep adding whites and really bringing up the contrast there. Now, I'm not too worried about all the details. Their faces are very small. I can't hit the eyes. Some of you might not be able to either. I swear on the tabletop, it will look really good and fine without having to put too much more effort into this. Now, the hair is where I put more of my effort into. We're going to add a little bit of texture here, where it's going to actually help us create more detail than was what's actually there. I've done mine with the traditional sister's hair. You can do it with any color that you like. For me, I started with a neutral gray, and then you're just going to want to make scratchy highlights. I went all the way back up to white and then a bright white, but you're just going to go from the bottom parts of the hair, and you're just going to want to make thin lines leading to the top of the head. And it's going to stop short of actually reaching it. This is going to kind of make the hairline that would naturally be up there, add that texture. You add a few layers of that, whatever color that you want, and you're going to have a really good top of the head. And whenever you're playing, you'll be able to see a little bit of that texture, and it's going to make it look really good. And when you're playing, it's going to bring everything together. Moving on to the final part of this mini is going to be the power weapons that the Custodes wield. Everyone has a little bit different recipe for power weapons, and they all typically tend to look really good. This one for me just looks good and it's really fast. It doesn't require you to spend a lot of time doing blends back and forth, which is a pretty popular way of doing power weapons. Here, we're essentially just going to be basing with the color of your choice. Everything I'm going to be referencing is, in relation to this blue that we're going to be using today. So we're going to apply just kind of a neutral, kind of slightly darker blue to the base where the power weapon is. And then we're going to make some pretty thick and unrefined highlights with a bright blue. And we're only using three colors here: the mid blue, the bright blue, and the white, with some contrast paint. So after we get those thick lines on there, we're going to give it a little bit of time to dry. Shouldn't be too long though. You'll be able to move on to the next step. We're going to dunk everything we just did with a dark blue contrast paint. I use Beowulf blue. That's going to blend the two together and darken everything back down so that we can use those same colors for more highlights. So we're going to go back through. You're going to aim for the corners and a little bit within that thicker highlight that you did before with the bright blue. This is just going to start making a small gradient, and it's going to introduce those really bright poppy colors that we want there. So after you're done making those edge highlights again with that blue, just make sure that you kind of make some squiggly lines and some sharp lines. You're going to do this across the blade, and this is going to start making that crackling energy effect. It's going to look pretty good with just this first coat, but it's really going to come together when we start doing white. Now, doing white on power weapons, you want to use a bit sparingly so that it's not overpowering your color here. So I've just limited mine to the very edge, the corners on the top of the axes and the spear. And then you're going to do that same squiggly highlighting over what you did with the blue. Now, this can cross over it, it can go between it, and between those two colors, the white and the bright blue, it's going to make like a crackling energy effect. It's going to come out really good. It's going to read well because we darkened that blue before with the contrast paint so that you can see it from across the table. And this is just my favorite way I found to do power weapons. Hard to go back when you find something this fast and easy. Alright, and that's it. You should be left with a few big, beautiful custodian women ready to go for your games of 40K. And I appreciate you sitting here with me, listening to me talk about painting. It means a whole lot. This channel is very new. We're just getting started. So if you liked what you saw, please feel free to like, subscribe, comment what you want to see. I want to make new videos every single week, for new ways to paint, kit bash, stuff that's going to be really interesting for y'all. So just let me know what you want to see, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much.